All right, welcome back to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. Today, I got a great guest calling on. We're going to talk about, kind of a little bit deeper dive into anxiety and sports and kind of the intersection of those. My guest kind of self-described himself as a little bit of a nerd when it comes to that stuff. A nerd, a little bit of an athlete, but I'm really excited to kind of talk about how something like jiu-jitsu or maybe also possibly some other sports can help somebody kind of lower that anxiety, right? And help you um, better your life, uh, better navigate through life and those kind of things. He's also an accomplished author. He's got a handful of books. Um, has written Motor Mind, User's Manual to Our Cognitive Mechanics, Bridging Worlds, Navigating Honor, Shame, and Self-Identity as a First-Generation Child, Black Belt Mindset, Backpack to Rucksack, Insight into Leadership and Resilience by Military Experts. We're going to talk a little bit more about that one. And Combat Psych Handbook. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that one. So very accomplished author, got a lot of very exciting things, like I said, with anxiety, psychology. So hang on to your seats. It could be a fascinating conversation.
Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
So welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Hey, what's up, man? Stoked to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you here. Like I was telling you right before we recorded, man, I kind of, I'll say, I've taken a couple of psychology courses many, many years ago in college. It's one of those things I think is very fascinating, although I will self-admit I don't know a ton about it. But when you first reached out and I was looking at your website, I was like, this is really fascinating, right? Like you kind of hear all the time about like how sports can help people with a lot of different things, but like you took it a step further and part of a master's program, really dove into it, really got a lot of data and science on how jiu-jitsu can, help with that. Before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your military journey and all that, kind of catch us up with who you are.
Yeah, so I was a combat engineer in the Army. I got out. I joined at 32 years old, so definitely a late dude. I made it by the cutoff by a few, like 6 months. Went to basic training at Fort Jackson, went to OCS in Georgia, and then engineer school in Missouri. So, became a combat engineer, was stationed in California. I was part of a non-deployable unit, so I never did deploy during my short contract. And then, I wrote a book when I got out about a year ago, and it was kind of a meditation on my time as a platoon leader, and in light of one of my soldiers who survived his suicide attempt. And I worked with a buddy, really close friend of mine, who was he was in the Marine Corps, and now he's in the Army. He lost 13 guys from his unit to suicide, which is just an insane number. And so, not me myself not having been to war, I was working with all these warriors who had been to war. You know what I mean? All these brothers of mine who had seen and done things that just it was heavy stuff, And so I love these guys, and I grew really close to them, and they shared a lot of private stories with me that bonded us, and it was really cool how we can get into it, how jiu-jitsu kind of gave me a understanding of their world that I didn't really expect to know. And so they've given me permission to share some of their stories and whatnot. And it just writing the book helped me process it. And I worked on a master's while I was in the Army as a platoon leader. So it was an online master's in organizational psychology. And I figured it would kind of fuel me as a leader and feed me, objective information, objective data that could help me grow as a leader and benefit the troops. So I didn't anticipate writing a book, until I got out, and then was just reflecting on things. So hopefully it can help people. And I mean, that's kind of the quick and dirty about my stint in the Army.
Gotcha. Isn't it interesting how just things happen in life sometimes and just stuff just comes together? Not intending to write a book and you just end up writing a book.
Yeah, it started as a journal entry because I was thinking about Cody. He wrote Cody wrote the foreword to the book as a suicide attempt survivor, just kind of a word of hope to those struggling, and and then Austin, who lost those 13 guys from his unit, he wrote the foreword. And this is like super heavy stuff, and I don't mean to be that heavy right now, but kind of like just came out swinging to your listeners. But Yeah, man, it just weighed really heavy on my heart, and I thought to myself, like, what could I have done better as a leader? You know, what did I do well? What good did I do for the platoon and for the guys? And I don't know, man. Leadership's messy. You know, there's so many gray areas. But yeah, what started off as a sort of a journal entry, thinking about some of the guys who mentored me before I joined, it turned into a 400-page book where I was just kind of, yeah, I plug in some of the science on leadership too. So it's got some research articles in there, just so I know I'm not talking out of my own opinion, if you will. I want it to be as objective as possible because, you know, we all have our subjective experiences. Like everybody who joins the military knows that we all have different experiences. You know, whether the mission set changes or the unit changes or the command climate, there's so much to it. You know, nobody walks the same exact path in the military. And so it's much harder than I thought to find like a very black and white answer to some complex leadership situations. So that's why I wrote a book. And yeah, man, just want to normalize the weirdness for people.
That's a very good point. You know, there's not always a black and white answer, but if you can read about past situations,
Mhm.
when a situation comes up, you can maybe reference to it and say, yeah, you know, or judged how this person handled it. Could I handle the situation this way, or could I adapt the way this was handled for my situation or
Dude,
whatever?
I
You know,
love that.
find that gray
Yes.
area somewhere in between, like what works, right? It can
Yep.
be that kind of that guide for you one way or another. So now I was kind of curious because it was, you know, on leadership and resilience, and I'm sure you probably learned a million different things while writing that and talking to people. Was there anything in particular that you learned that you found profound about leadership while going through that?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at and you can go to my website to kind of get a distilled version of this because I posted a lot of these on the website, but each chapter is written about a dude in my life that was serving in uniform. So they were Navy SEALs, Green Beret officers, a MARSOC officer, a couple pilots, EODs, rescue swimmers. So all different branches. And each chapter has a nugget of wisdom from those dudes, right? So that's what stood out to me is the profound wisdom they had because my platoon, when I exemplified that, would benefit. So, like, um, the Green Beret in my life. So, Craig, um, talked about being humble and being calm, and that's huge for the guys. You know, especially when you're. So I was just in the field training. I wasn't, you know, again, I wasn't deployed, but in the field, things get pretty crazy because we train to be as stressful as war. We try to simulate that, and so a lot of people, you know, when it's 127 degrees out in the desert and you're in full kit, things can get weird fast, you know. And so it's really important that when you give orders and whatnot, that your guys see you calm, even when things look chaotic and they are chaotic. So that was really huge. Dealing with different personalities, you know, whether there's conflict and things of that sort, you want to stay as even keeled as possible. And we can talk about jujitsu and how that reinforced that with like I want to say with fists, but that wasn't. We didn't always throw fists. We did have combat jujitsu, and that taught us a lot. But you know, we'd get choked out pretty quickly if we lose our calm. And then some other stuff like so I changed some of the names in the book, so I got to remember like what was his name in the book. So like the Navy SEAL, one of the SEALs in the book, his name in the character in the book is Jared, but he's actually a real friend of mine. So and he's serving still. So for OPSEC, I don't want to say his name. So yeah, Jared in the book told me, you know, either do something or shut your mouth. Basically, like don't keep talking about it. If you're gonna do something, just execute. You know, and that again, soldiers love that. So you're leading a bunch of enlisted guys as an officer. Let's say you're a platoon leader, you can't just make promises to the guys and girls that you're leading. You got to deliver, you know. And so you'd see that. You'd see what happens if there's certain leaders that would just kind of dangle the carrot, but then the Joes wouldn't see that, and then that leader would lose credibility in their eyes. So it's things of that sort. I mean, these are just two pieces that stood out right now, but there's endless examples in the book. I will say my EOD buddy Brad, whom I'm actually going to see him tonight, his advice was pretty profound and shocked me really. Because I remember I was kind of in a situation at work where I felt like I couldn't be myself. I felt like I had to be a version of myself that the troops or certain leaders wanted to see. And this dude's been to war, he's been shot at, you know, he's had buddies blown up and he's lost a lot of guys. Um, and everything anything he'd tell me about war, I mean, I'm all ears, right? And his advice to me was be authentic. Be the authentic version of yourself, whether you're a goofball, if you have a sense of humor, whether you're a nerd, whether you're a jock, whatever you are. Doesn't matter if you're in uniform. You don't change that. The military doesn't need people who are inauthentic. It needs your authentic personality. That blew my mind when he said, "You have permission to be funny. You have permission to be relaxed. You have permission to be whatever you want, or well, rather, whoever you are, because the people you're serving with, they're going to know if you're disingenuine." So,
Oh, they're gonna
right,
pick it up really,
so
really quick.
fast.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're gonna label you as fake
Mhm.
if you're not being authentic and genuine.
Yeah, I mean, because soldiers, they'll poke at you when you're a leader. I mean, you're in a fishbowl, especially when you're a junior officer and you're that close to them. Because we were super close in the field. I mean, we're sleeping cots next to each other in the vehicle. Sometimes we had to share the vehicle in the wintertime. You're doing hygiene out there together. Like it's a pretty close knit group when you're in the field that often. And the soldiers will poke at a leader, just to see who you are. Um, and it was surprising to me how much they saw. There's You can't really pull the wool over their eyes, and I love that because it does keep us honest as leaders. Um, yeah, like even times where I didn't think they'd see things, they'd come up and be like, "Hey, sir, I heard so and so, or such and such happened, or whatever." And it's like, how the heck did you where do you have like ears and eyes, man? But it was cool because if you do good by them, they let you know. They let you know, like, "Hey, thanks for doing that for us," or whatever it is, and it's just um, it's cool. It's really cool.
Well, for anybody who ends up watching this or listening to it, that if you're a parent, you're probably chuckling a little bit. As a parent, it's kind of like kids.
Mhm.
Like your kids pick up on way more than you ever expect. Like they just watch your every move, just
Yeah.
like the troops under your command. I mean, whether you're an officer or you're an NCO, like they're watching everything that you do.
Yeah.
So like they are gonna know everything that you do, and you have to be genuine. You have to be real. You have to, you know, you can't lie to them. You can't sugarcoat things. Like be honest, be blunt, be who you are. So
Yeah.
now, how about resilience? Out of curiosity, any good lessons you got there?
Yeah, so that would come from my army dad. He's an NCO who was there in Iraq during, the initial siege and all that. Um, there's him and some other guys I got to talk to. Man, they came close to, you know, taking their own lives at some points, right? And the weight that they felt was real serious. And they taught me a lot about leadership in the sense that I don't want to add pressure to someone's life who's already got, demons that they're fighting and they've got darkness in their life that they're still trying to make sense of. I mean, over a decade past, right? It's heavy stuff. And but what they taught me was for those who I mean, look, self-medication is huge, right? A lot of people will drink, a lot of people will dissociate. I mean, just normal without massive trauma, we self-medicate. It's just as a species, let alone a dude who's been to war or a gal who's been to war and seen all this stuff. And so, um, the most resilient minds, what I noticed is they were able to get stuff out of their bodies, get stuff through a hobby, whether they shoot guns, ride horses, do jujitsu, they channel it because you can't just wish it away. You can't just pretend it didn't happen. You've got to let your body get that stuff out, that get that aggression out. But they do it in healthy ways. So they wouldn't repress it. They'd get it out. Um, and I mean, dude, resiliency it's such a hard thing to quantify, but it's definitely one of those things that's from what I gather, and I don't have all the answers. I should have probably said that from the beginning.
No, don't
Even
don't feel bad. Nobody has all the answers.
Well, even it just sounds like, "Oh, I wrote a book on this, so I
Yeah,
should know it," but it's more about I'm willing to have the discussion about it.
yeah. But if we had all
But
the answers, we'd have the problem fixed.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, so they give us a PowerPoint in the army that says like, resilience is the tennis ball, right? It bounces back. But being too rigid is you're like a glass ball that just shatters, right? And so what I understand is that people they can decompress, they can recharge from burnout while they're dealing with something heavy. That keeps them resilient. It's not that they're impervious to stress, they're not impervious to bleeding, right, on the battlefield, but what they do is they allow themselves the ability to recover and recharge while they're continuing down those hard paths in life. And instead of repressing it, bottling it in, and then either self-destructing, self-sabotaging, blowing up at somebody, they're able to kind of have a release valve of pressure throughout their life, and they find it through a hobby, again, through relationships, whatever it is, or all of the above, really, because you need everything. I mean, it's such a holistic process. But those are the guys who are I saw as super resilient, and the ones that weren't, the ones who came close to taking their lives, or who unfortunately did take their lives, from what I gather through my friends, it's they felt trapped and isolated. And that it's not that they're weak people, it's just that they didn't find those modalities to kind of get stuff out of them. They kept it isolated, they kept it in, and dude, eventually the body just it degrades through, your energy storage, your ability to, man, just have the emotional bandwidth to do life, that it kind of closes in on you. The walls close in. And that seems to be kind of the opposite of resilience. It's just that they stay as strong as possible up until they have nothing left to give. And to me, the process of resilience should be a lot more dynamic than that. It shouldn't be this just white knuckling, I'm going to sit here and just keep myself together as long as possible. It's more about, hey, what do I do right now to get this out of me? What do I do to, through self-care, through rest, and then again, through getting that aggression out. And that's where jujitsu is like a powerful tool.
Yeah, I think just kind of sitting there letting that bottle. That's a kind of a that's a passive way of dealing with it. Like it's just going to keep
Mhm.
building up. Like the active way is jujitsu or doing something is whole health or nutrition, exercise, counseling, whatever other treatments are out there, whatever. Right? It's actively going out there and saying, okay, enough of this crap. I'm going to find some modality to do something about this. Enough of this
Yeah.
crap.
And grieving,
So
grieving's huge too, man. Grief is a powerful way to process trauma. And, if we could always get into this pretty deeply, but from my understanding, the way that the brain, like the neurotransmitters, will work when you store a traumatic memory, there's a lot of energy locked into it, like emotive energy. They call it salience, um, like affect salience, meaning how much emotion is kind of tied to that memory. And through grief, you're able to then process the emotions of it and still store that memory, because you're not just going to have amnesia and forget what happened, but that memory will be stored back in your brain without all that angst, all the emotion with it. It'll kind of dial it down from an 11 down to however much you grieve and process it. You're able to then store it back at lower valence. I think they call it valence, but that's another term for it. But that's one thing I try to preach to guys who are struggling with stuff, and grief is a very awkward thing as a grown man to cry, but I needed to do it for some stuff that happened to me, not in the military. It was my prior life. And um jujitsu brought it out of my body. It came out on the mats, dude. I was having like a freeze response. I was going through some flashbacks. I didn't know that was what I was feeling. And then saw a therapist through a buddy of mine, and he's a badass DEA agent. So I trusted him when he was like, dude, go see a therapist. Um, and then, I cried a lot. I grieved a lot. It was pretty gnarly, like weeks and weeks and weeks. It was just, I thought I was broken. But after I finally purged it out of my system, dude, I was able to go back to jujitsu, and it was never that bad again.
well, that's good. And there is nothing wrong with crying. Sometimes the energy's got to come out. You just
Ugly
got to let it
cries,
out.
bro.
Yeah, I mean,
Ugly
hey,
cries. Oof.
shoot, I've been there. I mean, hell, I'll admit it. I've done it a couple times this year. We're just stress, life.
Yeah,
Like
man.
work, life, kids. It just things just get to you, and you're just like, hey, look,
You need that
I
moment.
just gotta sit here on the couch and just let it roll,
Yeah.
and just get those emotions out. Man, maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes. Maybe it bothers you for a few weeks. Who knows? But sometimes you just got to let it out and just be like, okay, all right, I feel a little bit better. I took myself from a 10 or 11 down to an 8. I feel a little bit more
Yep.
calm now. I could
Yep.
jump right back into it and go back into whatever tasks I was doing for the day, whatever you got to go through for the rest of life. So
Yeah, man. That's awesome. And you do it with more clarity. You're more grounded. and then you're less caught off guard by emotions. And I think, I mean, from personal experience, that's why I self-medicated. I was pretty wild before I joined the military, and not proud of what I did, and the things that I was caught up in, but I was running away from a past I didn't want to think about. And so, dude, like the alcohol consumption and the drugs and all that stuff, it was just a way to self-medicate. And I don't fault anybody for doing that stuff, especially, when I was in the military and I'd find out, certain Joes were struggling with different addictions and whatnot. I wasn't going to judge them, because to me, it's self-medication. I'm not going to encourage it, but it's like, dude, it's such a bigger picture than just change your behavior. It's a matter of getting to the bottom of what's causing it, the root cause, and dealing with it. And I mean, I still deal with issues for sure. I'm still not where I want to be in life, but I'm growing, and I hope that my story can encourage others, while they're struggling with theirs. But especially as men, and I noticed this through, like, with combat veterans, a lot of them, they knew, it's like this silent acceptance or this silent awareness that that you're struggling with the same demons that that guy over there is struggling with. But all you know is you all are drinking a ton of whiskey before bed to go to bed to not remember things. And this is coming from friends of mine who, confess this stuff, right? I mean, they'd remember the sounds and they'd remember the scenes and who they lost. And so a lot of them were just trying to not remember that stuff. And it's heavy, and it's out of my love for these guys and my respect for them for what they did for our country, that I want better for them in their subconscious, dude, in that those final moments before they try to go to bed at night. Uh, those are the spaces where I want them to have peace, And so and those are areas where I struggled. I was drinking a lot to go to bed before, like 7 days a week, a lot, like blackout drunk. And so, dude, yeah, again, I'm no one who can judge these guys, but definitely want to show them some love and just have these discussions.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was that way after my first deployment to Iraq. I was like that for a couple of years.
Mm,
Anybody who was with me over there in Yokota, Japan, knows exactly. Many nights where all I have to go off of is the stories of everybody who was around me because I don't remember
yep.
most of it.
Mm,
And I know my mom was very concerned about my alcohol consumption there for a couple of years. Luckily, I had a great group of guys and gals that I went down to Ecuador with, and it sounds weird to say it, but we kind of drank it out down there.
mm,
But it was the people I was with, right? The people I was with, the healing, um, the opportunity to kind of talk and be with the right kind of people with the right mindset, and
right.
kind of came back from there. And IPCS back to the States from Japan, and it was like, all right, I'm back here. Didn't have access to bars where I could just walk to, and it was like, all right, I gotta change this behavior because this isn't good. This isn't healthy.
Hmm.
Like I just knew that if I kept that up, I wasn't gonna be here today. Something bad was gonna happen. So
Totally.
you just can't,
Totally.
you can't like go
I'm
down that
glad you
path.
made it
Like,
through, bro. I'm glad you
no,
made it through.
just and now it's the point like I've gotten so old now. If you see me drinking, like I'm only gonna have one or two because I don't like the hangover feeling, and most alcohol makes me feel like warm and just I don't like the feeling anymore. So
Yeah, I hear
but
you.
it's like you can't I don't care what it is. Like it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be pornography, it could be gambling. Like there's a lot of bad things you could be doing. Um, but one thing I hate is when people judge people for those addictions. I just
That's
don't
great,
understand
man.
why this person's doing this. Like, why can't they just stop? Why can't they do? It's like,
Hmm.
okay, if you've never had a problem, no matter how bad the problem is, or you've never had somebody in your family that's had a problem, like you just don't understand. Like, it's not that they could just stop.
Hmm.
It's not that easy. Like, there's the trauma or there's the reason below. Somebody doesn't just wake up one day and be like, I'm going to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. I'm just
Yeah,
going to go
man.
gamble every penny I have away. Like, you don't just wake up and make that conscious decision as a rational person. You do it because there's a trauma and you're masking something, you're hiding something. Like, you know, you need help, you need support. They need love and encouragement, not to be, hated on and chastised for or, and looked down upon. But unfortunately, a lot of
Right.
people in society do that. And I'll say some people in our veteran community do that to each other. And it's like, come on, like we gotta do better as a community.
Mm,
So, but we've all had those briefings on resilience. Even
Yeah.
if it's been a few
Lost in the
years.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, dig back. I know those memories are you probably repressed those memories back there somewhere. Maybe if it's
Death
been a
by
couple years.
PowerPoint, bro. Don't bring me back.
it's
No.
it's back there somewhere. We all know we packed that away somewhere. All
I
those
was that guy
command
that
room
stood up in
stalls.
the back when they're like, "Don't fall asleep. Stand up if you're gonna fall asleep." I'm like, "All right, I'm moving to the back."
Oh, we've all done that at least once or twice.
Yeah.
It's weird as in the civilian world if you ever get up and do that and they look at you like, why is this person getting up and
Dude,
moving to the back?
it's so annoying. That is so annoying about yeah, that's exactly right. When you go back into society after you leave the military and little things like that make you stand out, it's like, guys, I'm not that weird. I mean, this is what we do. I'm not gonna fall asleep, but yeah, you're totally right. I'm glad you noticed that.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
mind looking weird to civilians. I just don't fit in the world anymore, dude.
I've noticed it once or twice. It's like, wow, those three guys in the back, they're definitely the vets in the group.
Yeah. Heck
They're
yeah.
not trying to fall asleep. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, well, I wanted to shift focus now, kind of back to the jujitsu, um, because
Mm.
your thing was all about anxiety and anxiety management. Could you kind of frame for everybody kind of what anxiety is? Maybe what it is, what it isn't, a little bit for those people
Yeah, I
who may
mean,
not be a little bit more aware.
in simple terms, I would say anxiety has to do with like a sort of a hyper vigilance in the human mind and in the brain. So it's got to deal with kind of an awareness of what like environmental stimuli, threat detection, things of that sort. And you can have anticipatory anxiety. So just thinking about a potential issue could cause your system to kind of rev up. And I see it as sort of warming the engine prior to fight, flight, freeze, faint, fawn, whatever your body's going to do for primal survival. I'd say anxiety is a state and it's exhausting. It's a state of awareness and knowing that something's coming and I got to react, but I don't know exactly how. And there's different variations and nuances to this, but I'd say from a neurophysiological level, it's kind of an activation of the nervous system. And it's oftentimes not like an actual reaction because to react with fight or flight, you're actually doing something, with your body. But anxiety is that kind of that pre-state. I'd say it's more about anticipation, if anything.
It's kind of like that preparatory command when marching, right? It's like, hey, you're paying attention, like your body's mentally aware of what's going on. Like if you know you're going to a crowd, like a concert, but you have a problem with crowds, like
Right.
I'm assuming, like if you have a problem with that, anxiety might be popping up of like, I don't know why I'm so on such high alert. But it's because if you have a problem with crowds, maybe you're aware of it or not, but know that you're going to go
Right.
into an environment like that, or maybe it's loud noises, or gosh, I guess it could be anything, but something like that, right?
Yep. And hypervigilance is like a more poignant form of that. Like it's way more, it's super intense. And depending on the trauma and what happened in the past, and there's a lot to it, like how old the person was when they experienced it, or how repetitive the trauma was, and just the sheer like magnitude of what that trauma was will dictate how much hypervigilance occurs. And that's a situational awareness that's like spider senses off the Richter scale. You want to know what's behind you, what's in front of you, like 360-degree radar going off at all times. And that's extremely exhausting. That's like a huge primal limbic system activation in the brain, amygdala, all of that. And the issue with all these kind of sensors going off is that your prefrontal cortex kind of downregulates a bit. So your body's more concerned with surviving than it is about thinking complex thoughts. And so your prefrontal cortex, that's where your personality's at. That's where your logical, engineering thoughts, your more complex thoughts, your meditative thoughts, prayer, all of that exists because we have a massive prefrontal lobe in our brains. But when we're anxious, the mental resources go into like, uh-oh, I got to survive this incoming threat. And a lot of dudes live in that, kind of neighborhood, right? So it's yeah, and it expresses differently in the body. You can have indigestion, you can have the sweats, you can there's just so much, increased heart rate, shallow breathing. There's a lot to it depending on the state of anxiety that they're in.
I don't think I've ever heard it put so perfectly that it makes so much sense of just kind of shutting, like when you say like that engineering brain, that artistic brain of shutting that down and just the core functions of your brain of fight or flight.
Mm,
I'm just kind of thinking of like that environment. Like if you have a problem with crowds and you find yourself in a concert or something like that, I just think about that person that's like on the edge of the crowd because they want their back to the wall. They're
Totally.
scanning
Gotta see the
everybody. They're
exit,
looking at
gotta see
hands.
the
They got to see
entrance.
the exit,
Yep.
and they're just kind of sitting there stiff, no emotions on their face. Just kind of scanning everything, and it's like they're like, dude, they're ready to go one direction or another, right? Like
Totally. Like for me,
just
I
do it.
hate
One of
sitting
those things.
in, like if I'm on a plane or at church or whatever, I have to sit in the aisle seat. Like I cannot sit inside because if something goes down, a shooter, somebody walks in, I don't know, whatever it is, I need to be in the aisle seat so I have access to the door, the person, friggin' single leg takedown, I don't whatever. But yeah, man, I just want to say that if anyone's
I mean,
weird like me, you're not weird.
I know there's a lot
You're
of people
cool.
that have the issues in restaurants where they want their want to be in the back of the restaurant, back to the back of it. I've
Don't
heard
put
that
your
about.
back towards the window too,
Yeah,
especially
don't
if you
put your
live in
back to the
Chicago now.
window.
But yeah, yeah,
Um,
I've heard stories.
I've joked with, well, kind of joked with people before. They're like, what would happen if, something happened if there's like a threat or somebody, active shooter or something. I'm like, or people start running. I'm like, if people start running, or if you see me running, you might want to pick a direction. I'm not telling you which direction to go. They're like, why? I said, because I don't know. I might run towards the threat. I might run away from the threat. I don't know. There's no telling what I might do. But
Depends on if I had my coffee this morning.
yeah, if I've had my
If I had
coffee and I'm
coffee
gonna
and then there's yeah, I'll run into it. If not, I'm like, oh
I,
shoot.
I might just be like, screw it. I'm to go out that door. I'm out of here. Or I might just be like, yeah, it's just one guy. Like maybe I'll just, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
but
I got
this
my
is where jujitsu is huge, bro. When you know what to do, if there's a situation like that, that's one thing that's really cool. Because I would never have known what to do if there's a threat. And now because I roll, at least I know what to grab and how to grab, and you know what I'm saying. So, that's one thing to think about. For people who feel fearful is just be that person that can respond to a situation like that, and then always have a tourniquet on you. Quick clot, like I have quick clot on me. I have a tourniquet just in case. You know how like battle rescues, we always like battle buddy rescues is what we learned in the army. If one of our guys gets shot, you gotta, or if you get shot, you deal with self rescue. So you try to tourniquet yourself if you can, or whatever it is. But if you're down for the count, then your guys have to bound to you, taking incoming fire and whatnot. We learned this all in basic training. And then you rescue your buddy, right? But you can't just walk into gunfire and get shot. So you gotta have a tactical approach. But all this stuff kind of helps, and that's why I definitely, I admire these young folks who join the military so young because they're learning about this stuff. And, God forbid you're ever around an active shooter or whatnot. Like you want to be that person that's reliable and that's stays calm and is able to help others. I think that's just something that really inspires me about young people in the military.
yeah. Well, hopefully if yeah, hopefully that never happens. But if I ever find myself in a situation, I hope I respond and do the right thing. I will tell everybody I don't carry any tourniquets or quick clot or anything with me. But I usually have fingernail clippers and band-aids in the trunk of my car. So I mean
There you go.
I've got kids after all.
If you have a
So
belt, you have a tourniquet. You can use that.
what? That's a good point. I usually have a belt on, so I guess I
There
do
you
have
go.
a makeshift tourniquet, but I do have
Yep.
band-aids. Like I said, I got band-aids, and I think I have my poncho still in a bag that I
Oh,
carry,
that's
in my
funny.
trunk. So I got something, right?
Wait,
So makeshift.
was it issued by the Air Force?
Uh,
Did
yeah,
you not
probably.
return
Yeah.
gear? Did you not return gear
Uh,
and you still cleared
I don't
base?
know.
You
I
cleared
don't
out a
know.
post?
It was rain gear. I don't know what it. I don't know what it is, but I got a
Yeah,
bag with a bunch of stuff in it. But yeah, I mean, I can MacGyver that shit. We'll come up with something in a situation.
there you go.
I keep blankets in there too and jumper cables. I'm sure that could be used for something, right? I watched MacGyver when I was a kid. We'll figure
Nice.
it out in an emergency. So, um, to your research, kind of just blew my mind there with the way everything shut down. I think pretty good there. But when it comes to the jujitsu and what it does to
Mhm.
the mind, what were some of the key findings that you found there
Yeah.
with some of that
Um,
and what that does?
so and this book's not out yet. I know you listed a bunch of books. I'm actually so on my website there's like a coming soon page. I literally was writing this today, the black belt book, Black Belt Mindset. So yeah, I don't want to false advertise. These books are pending release, but so two of them are out now. The Combat Psych Handbook and the Backpack to Rucksack. But for the black belt one, yeah, it was based on my master's thesis that I did. I was able to interview 32 black belts and 32 non-jujitsu practitioners and kind of do a comparative study. The reason this study even happened is because of Jocko Willink. I train at his gym, and he gave me permission to access some of the black belts. And so a huge thank you to him for enabling this. But the black belts told me about their stories regarding what got them into jiu-jitsu, how they deal with anxiety. And overall, what I found is when black belts experience a threat, so I had people kind of self-disclose um, their anxiety levels before, during, and after like a high anxiety event in their life. So what I found is with the black belts, they have initially basically they're lower across the board, but than people who don't practice jujitsu. But um, with these non-practitioners, they have a slightly elevated anxiety rate kind of after the event ends because there's residual adrenaline in their body and whatnot. But when black belts engage with a threat, their engagement with that threat causes like a substantial decrease in anxiety even afterwards. So they might get anxious, and some of these guys were like UFC fighters or MMA fighters and stuff. So they'd get anxious right before getting in the ring or before like anticipating some sort of fight going down. But as soon as they get into the event, I mean, their anxiety is just gone. And then afterwards, their anxiety stays gone because the threat was sort of, it's just in their mind. You know, they know what they're doing, they know how to handle it. And then through breath control, they're able to really maintain kind of the braking mechanism of their physiological response. They're able to keep their mind very, very prefrontal because jujitsu is like, you know, three-dimensional chess. And so they're working out all these amazing, um, sequences on the mats. And for like a white belt, you know, we're taught moves that are okay. So you're going to execute this arm bar or this triangle choke, and it's like steps 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But you talk to a black belt about that same sequence, and he'll tell you like, oh, there's actually 25 different variables I'm thinking about. But they do this thing called chunking, where they chunk those moves together. And I mean, just the nuances and the granularity of what they're trying to manipulate, whether it's a finger or just a small angle here or there, you know, shifting weight here or there. It's amazing. But they'll have this insane amount of kind of resolution on that image, right? And then they'll execute it seamlessly because it's ingrained subconsciously. But it's almost a meditative state, you know, even though we're talking throwing blows, right? Or getting hit or getting struck or getting choked out, but they're able to kind of dissociate from that in a healthy way, um, and not be triggered, if you will, not be in a state of alarm. Um, but still, this is like a fight that pretty much feels life and death, right? Someone's grabbing on your throat, like you're
Right.
you're you're
It's a
gonna react,
combat sport.
but they stay so calm through it. And anyway, I mean, I could talk for days about this.
I'm assuming that calmness comes from all of the training, and constantly being in that chaos and mastering the control in that chaos. And that's probably
Mhm,
where I'm assuming in other moments of anxiety, being able to just control your breath and
mhm.
master the chaos for a second and be like, it's okay. I could react. I don't
And
remember. I
it's
saw,
cool. I was gonna say that carries off the mats too, but sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I saw somewhere, I heard somewhere, there's a difference between reaction and responding, right? And the best thing that you can do for anything
Mhm,
is to not react. You need to respond. You need to take that momentary break, even a couple of seconds, to just take a breath or a half a breath and have half a second to think,
mhm,
so you can respond appropriately instead of react, especially when it comes to something, anger or violence or something like that, because your response is so much better, which is I think an important lesson, especially for veterans, when it comes to something that might trigger you. If you could just take a half a second to breathe and respond to it in an appropriate way, that could keep you from a myriad of potential issues that could come up with it, right? Snapping at a cashier because they gave you the wrong change, or who knows what, or loud music at an event, or whatever comes up, like appropriate responses.
yeah.
So,
Hey, sorry. There's like an F-35 flying overhead, and they're super loud. They've been
the damn
landing.
Air Force.
They've been doing their like what do they call? What do you call it with the vertical lands?
Oh,
I forget what
I
they
don't
call
know.
it, but they're doing their vertical engine, so it's so
Of
loud.
course.
But what you were talking about, taking that second to breathe, I was gonna just kind of interrupt you for a second, which I try not to do because I get
No,
really
that's all right.
excited
Go
about
ahead.
this stuff. But there's a really interesting kind of neurophysiological property to this. If anyone's interested in the brain, because I know, especially with dudes, guys don't want to talk about like touchy feely feelings, right? It's like, give me the hard science of what's going on. If you look at the brain like a biomechanical engine, then it really kind of makes this way more tangible. And so your visceral gut through your vagus nerve, your visceral gut has like a faster response to your environment than your prefrontal cortex by like nanoseconds. So the reason why is your brain stem, obviously lower part of your brain, it's hardwired to your guts, not just your guts, but your lower extremities. And that's what kicks on your fight or flight. So your legs will run if you got to flight. Your hands will punch if you got to fight, right? But the way the neurocircuitry works is that there's a split second difference between your ability to think complicated thoughts or just higher brained executive thoughts about the situation and get the context. That lags a little bit more than your initial gut reaction. So taking that, just pausing for a moment, will allow your prefrontal cortex to catch up. Then you can filter your next action, whether you're going to say that thing you're about to say, or punch that person or run away, whatever it is, because any of these things could be appropriate, given the situation. I don't know,
Yeah, they
but
might very well be appropriate.
hey, I mean, and that's
Might very well
again,
not be.
yeah. So again, just taking that split second will give you that, yeah, will give you that ability to make a finer judgment call on what truly needs to happen in that situation. And I know from personal experience, again, I'm not a perfect human. There are times I react like an idiot to something because I feel it in my gut and boom, that's what's going on. But if I just breathe, filter through a correct filter what's actually going on, it's like, oh yeah, that person, they might have said it like that. That's not what they're really saying. Or I'm projecting my own issues here. But then we can go into other context about the gut usually being right. That's one thing, that's another flip side to this. There's some people in life who are in states of denial when it comes to their reality. So they'll feel something visceral, but they won't admit it. And this is complex, so I won't unpack it too much. But if you notice yourself kind of later in life kicking yourself because, yeah, dude, I should have followed my gut. If you're that kind of person, like I've been there a lot. um there's the reverse effect where you'll over filter stuff. So there's a genuine threat, but then we downplay it or minimize it, and then we kind of keep finding ourselves in these bad situations with the wrong people. And that's because our gut was telling us the right reaction, but we shut it down and overrode it. So there's a balance to this. It's a sliding scale.
That's really interesting. I think
Sorry to get so technical.
no, no, I love it. I think I think probably everybody can sit there and probably know somebody in their life that's been like that, that like keeps making bad decisions and overanalyzes everything. Or, there's probably a lot of listeners sit there and be like, man, yeah, I've probably said that far too many times in my life. Like I should have listened to my gut, or I know I've done it a few times where I'm like, yeah, it's just should have trusted my gut on that one. And there's times where I sit there and trying to think about it, like, oh well, my gut says this, but like, the numbers or logic would say this. It's like what direction do you go? Like, what do you do? So I'll keep that in mind. But
And dude, you tie this into leadership, man, especially like a tactical leader or in the military or whatever it is. And I mean, this is where that balance is so intriguing to me. And this is why I say it's a discussion. It's not about having answers, because everybody has a different perspective. Every situation, you have different personalities. You've got different, again, mission sets. You got different threats, different avenues of approach, and most deadly course of action, most likely course of action if you're looking at it from a military op-ord perspective. And so there's never a cut and dry black and white, this is the answer. It's never 1 + 1 = 2. It's always this insane algebra, this insane calculus that has to go on with leadership. And anyway, that's just me venting about this whole thing. That's why I wrote a book, to just mull this over. And I love talking to folks like you, because it gives space to have these talks of how insanely complex humans are, on top of the battlefield or the training environment or whatever the mission is we're trying to
there's no
accomplish.
doubt about it. We're definitely complicated, especially as vets. We just add an extra layer of complicatedness on it.
Yeah. I
We-
apologize to my
yeah,
boss all the time for
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, it is what it is. We're just complicated individuals. So,
Yeah,
but we're the best. We're the best. I mean, just personal
gotta
opinion.
love it.
Um, but no, it's yeah, we're the best. So I was also kind of curious, was there anything in your research when you're going through this that surprised you? Since you had been doing, been there at the gym doing jujitsu and stuff like that, I'm sure some of
Mm.
it probably didn't surprise you, but was there anything in the findings that you were like, wow, I did not expect this?
Yes. I've had panic attacks on the mats myself from some past trauma in life and stuff came up on the mats. I think the majority of the black belts I interviewed have also experienced panic attacks. I was not expecting that. These dudes are, I mean, they're warriors through and through. These dudes are badasses and they're just so cool. And they're insane fighters. I mean, you see them on the mats. I've rolled with several of them. Holy smokes. It's insane. It's like fighting an octopus. There's like 8 arms coming at you. It's insane. Their technical ability and how grounded they are as human beings. They don't look like they'd experience a threat ever. And they were normal human beings with social anxiety, with general anxiety, having had severe panic attacks, and they choose to battle through. They choose to rise up. They choose to face those things and conquer those things. And that was the coolest part of the study because I looked up to these guys like they're, gods or whatever. Like they're just these amazing people and they would just break it down like, "No, I'm just like you. I'm just a guy who didn't quit. I kept coming back and I went from a white belt and it got darker and darker and darker. Now I have a black belt." And seeing that authenticity and that vulnerability, and a lot of these guys are combat vets, you know, dude, it was so cool. It was so cool getting to know. I still geek out over this study, and it's just because we talk about battle scenarios, right? Them losing guys and getting shot at. A lot of them experience this stuff, and then how they work through it on the mats in jujitsu. One of them quit opiates and cocaine because of jujitsu. He literally sweat out his withdrawals on the mats. I mean, the
Wow.
shakes and the withdrawals on the mats in jujitsu. Stuff's cool, man. This stuff is like, I'm so grateful to these guys because they were that honest. And they're not the easiest people to get a hold of, man. Black belts, it's like talking to almost, it was like a veteran community where you better know somebody who knows somebody if you're going to approach me, right? Not on the mats. They weren't like this on the mats. They're very humble guys. But when it comes to asking about their personal private life, like it had to be word of mouth introduction between black belts. And luckily I got the credibility through them to continue this study. But it was just such sincere insight into their lives, man. I'm stoked. I love these guys. They're so cool.
That's awesome. And I had no idea what to expect for your answer on that, but I definitely did not expect panic attacks.
Dude. Yeah.
That one kind of surprised me.
They're
But
human beings, man. I couldn't believe it. I'm
yeah.
like, what? You guys are humans who've had it made me feel less crazy, it's cool. And I love that they shared that stuff, and I can't name names to protect their privacy. So I hope, I hope that's really understood. But the fact that, I could share this, I hope encourages people for sure. I hope people feel
No, it's
encouraged.
awesome that they were able to share because, there's no telling how many people that could help, having a study like that and who, over time, how many people could review that study, look at it and gain insight from it and get help from it. So, but it is cool too that you train at the same place that Jocko trains. So he must that
He's
must be
he's
that
an
must be
awesome
pretty
guy.
interesting. He might
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming he's just as intense as he seems like on his podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
He's
not
built different.
surprised.
He's built
Uh
different, man. But he's a good man. He's definitely
I
a
am surprised.
good
I'm
man.
not surprised by that. Yeah, he seems a pretty cool guy.
Mm.
Um I did want to ask, some people might be listening to this and say, "Hey, jujitsu sounds like a great idea, but maybe for whatever reason, physically, whatever, jujitsu may not be an option. Maybe there's no place to do it." When you're going through this, or maybe you've thought about it at some point, is there any other sports that you could think of that may also deliver some of the same benefits, or anything you ever thought of? If somebody's out there, like I said, jujitsu may not physically be the thing for them. Maybe they want to try something else that might deliver something similar.
Dude, I mean, it's anything that gets you in your body. So the concept here is that it's about grounding, and what that term means is feeling present in your body. And it's the opposite of dissociation. So jujitsu is a prime example because if you don't stay in your body and stay present, you will black out and wake up with guys above you like, "Hey dude, wake up." So But I mean, you could do this bowling, golfing, doing yoga, paddleboarding, kiteboarding. I mean, swimming. There's anything that gets your body moving where you have to think about your breath. You got to think about your form. You got to think about your physiology. That'll get you there. It's just a matter of exposure therapy. So if you're so for me, it was really rough doing jujitsu because some stuff that happened to me when I was younger in life. And so that was like probably the hardest thing to do. And yet I found myself on the mats just going through it. And so I want to caution people, you need to be cognizant of what you're exposing yourself to. So, you know, like it really depends on a lot about your background, but if there's something that you want to do that you're drawn to, and maybe that you're a little bit afraid of, that's probably it. That's probably the path to go down. I don't know. Talk to somebody you trust to make sure I'm not just blowing smoke. But so for me, I was super intimidated by jujitsu, right? And Muay Thai and boxing, getting punched in the face, all of that stuff. But
That's
through
understandable.
well, yeah. There's some friends of mine, they got me into it, and it was cool, it bonded us, and I felt that tribal connection, that primal, I needed that, right? So that fed me, but I was also scared of it simultaneously, and then it helped me access some stuff I was bottling up and that I was numbing out on for a while. Um, but again, and I had a moment where I, talked to a therapist, and he's like, "Look, dude, this is exposure therapy for you, and you could stop, you can not do it, you can medicate. There's a lot of stuff you could do, but you got to understand that when you're on the mats, you're gonna feel this stuff." So I chose to work through it, and it helped. But there were moments where it became overwhelming, and that's when the panic attack started, and for me, and I took a long time to get through all that, um but yeah, if basically any sporting activity, anything that gets you in your body where you're thinking about diaphragmatic breathing, you're breathing deep belly, you're slowing down your mind, you're slowing down your breath, and that will help you ground yourself, and you'll notice different things about your body. You'll notice aches and pains. You'll notice when you're feeling great. There's just this, depending on how dissociated somebody is. Like I was really dissociated. So I'm just like, what is this? I feel a breeze on my face, or I notice that the sky is a lot bluer and the trees are a lot greener than usual. There's that sort of sensation. And whatever gets you there, do it. As long as you're not feeling overwhelmed, or if you are overwhelmed, that you can throttle it back down with a safe environment, people that you trust to look after you. That's why I love rolling with vets, man. It's cool.
Awesome. That's great advice because, like I said, I wanted to ask that because I know there's some people that may look at it and be like, "Look, I can't physically do that, but maybe there's something else I could do." Because like maybe it's golf or swimming or gosh, no, who else? Who knows what else? Um, so last thing I was going to throw this up here. I was going to throw your website up here. So scrolling across the bottom, have no fear, everybody. Like always, it's down in the show notes, combatpsych.com. And you said you got a couple books that you're still working on there. So by the time this comes out, maybe you'll have them done. If not, everybody go check back in the future. I know I'm really excited about those, some of them. But you've got the Combat Psych Handbook is out, and Backpacks to Rucksack, which we talked a little bit, quite a bit about today. And you're
Mhm,
working on the Black Belt Mindset and
mhm.
Bridging Worlds, Navigating Honor, Shame, and Self Identity as a First Generation Child, and the Motor Mind, User's Manual to Cognitive and Mechanics, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So if anybody's interested in those, definitely go check them out. I know actually all of those look really, really interesting to me. But I've got a long list of books to read. One of the perks of being a podcast host. There's a lot of books to read, and yeah,
Yeah, a lot of homework.
eventually, yeah, a lot of homework, a lot more reading. It didn't know there's so much reading to do when you have a podcast. But but no, it's a lot of good stuff though. So go check it out. You've got a lot of other great information on there. You got your whole report on there. What was that, like 13 pages?
Yeah,
Was your whole report on there? And a nice little graphic that kind of breaks down the charts and stuff, and it kind of shows where the anxiety levels were. It's a lot of fascinating stuff. I kind of nerded out on it, kind of reading through it. So
thanks, man.
yeah, I thought it was
Appreciate it.
cool. So any
Thank you.
last words about everything we talked about?
I would say, so I have a friend, JP Lane, and he lost his legs in Afghanistan to an IED, and when people see him on his prosthetics, they always thank him for his service, and he's such a good dude. He's got such a big heart. He was also a combat engineer, and he'll tell people when they thank him for his service, he says you're worth it. And that really like touched my heart, man. And I told him I was going to copy him and give him credit. But I always like to say that to people is you're worth it. So if someone's struggling with anxiety, stress, depression, suicidality, whatever it is, panic attacks, whatever you're struggling with in life, because we're all human, we all have our struggles, just know you're worth it when it comes to recovery, when it comes to self-enrichment, self-care, any of that stuff. And I know it's especially hard as males to think about that, but I believe if people see their worthiness and feel their value, they'll invest in the right relationships and the right resources, and they'll find ways to improve their lives. I think adults are just as resilient as children. I think children have a tremendous amount of resilience, and we just we got to enable one another to go with what we know is right for ourselves and pick those healthy avenues. But I don't think we do that until we feel that we're genuinely worth it. And so I understand the struggle. I certainly do. And yeah, I just hope anybody who feels alone and isolated out there finds that sense of worthiness and pursues healthy means of getting out of that hole and living their best life.
Man, I love that. And pass along to him. I said that you are worth it. That might be the best response to thank you for your service I've ever heard.
Yeah, JP, he's I'm gonna get emotional if I think about it, but yeah, man, he
Yeah,
definitely blows people's minds when he says that, dude. He
I,
he
I can
genu he
totally see
means
that.
it. Oof, dude, yeah, if you look up JP Lane's story, I mean, he's a good dude. He changed my life when I met him.
Awesome. Well, please let him know. I think that's probably the best response I've ever heard. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap the show. But I thank you for coming on here and sharing with us, Dan.
Thanks, bud.
Yep. There you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed. As always, check out the website for all kinds of information and resources. And as I always say, if there's something not on there you think should be on there, let me know. Reach out. And if you're struggling for any reason, remember the National Suicide Hotline number is 988 press 1, or you can text 838 255.